November 1st, 2016. Darling, I made it to Iraq. The goal I set 15 years ago as a young kid in the wake of 9/11 has been realized. So far, my tour has consisted of 4 plane rides, 5 bus rides, countless miles of lugging my gear, 1 Monopoly win, 1 Monopoly loss, and 4 days at a transit way station awaiting further movement to my duty station. I was in Kuwait in 2014, 2015, and I was a platoon leader for that deployment. And then I was in Iraq. I was only there for 2017 because of my son's birth, but over there I worked with the division staff, and I did key leader engagements for visitors coming into Iraq.
I feel like Ryan and I are not totally typical when it comes to spouses in the military.
I think we Skyped on that first deployment twice.
Yeah.
And other than that, we wrote letters and journaled and stuff like that. Yeah.
I think a lot of people probably talk a lot more than we did, but sometimes we would go weeks where he was just really busy and I was really busy and the time difference was kind of crazy.
It got too complicated trying to get a hold of my son. He was only about 4 at the time, and you know, when I'd call, he'd already be in bed, or he hadn't woke up yet, or he was already at school, or I always would miss him, and then he was only 4, so he would get on the phone for 2 seconds and then run off and play, and it took me all day to arrange this one phone call. And then the phone call would be very dramatic. He'd cry, I'd cry, we would just both be a mess. So then I switched to letters and postcards. This is actually one of the postcards that I had sent him. I got this at the PX on one of the missions that I did. They had a little PX set up, and they had postcards. So then I just started sending him letters instead of trying to arrange the phone calls because it got too stressful on both ends.
Writing home was so important for the soldiers. It gave them a way to connect with people they loved and cared about at home, and vice versa. You know, the people at home were waiting anxiously for any word that their loved one was safe. And the soldier, always, you see in the letters, you know, I received your letter, or I only got 1 letter, are there more? Or why haven't you written? So it's so important, this connection.
Care packages are incredibly popular. My parents sent us multiple, and we would send them back and forth to each other. Mm-hmm. One thing we would include in that is a book of mandalas. And what we would do is we would color in a mandala, and then we would write a note in there. She was a much better colorist than I was.
In his defense, I work with kids like a lot, and I was working with kids then too. I get way more practice coloring than you do.
Yeah, that's true. I don't get a lot of reps in anymore, not since, 3rd grade.
When I look back on it now, it was almost like journaling. Like my husband was my real-time diary, and so I would write to him. They would seem so meaningless, like, hey, today, I went to Pizza Hut, and then we drove to this fob, and then we went to this fob, and, there was no encounter of anything, and then we came home. It's just kind of funny to think back to that time. Like, some of the things would say, I haven't heard from you. It says you're logged in Messenger, but I can't get a hold of you. Is everything okay? And then this one was kind of funny. It said, today was the most fun day that I've had in a while. We actually had Pizza Hut, and it made my day. And I thought that was really funny that, Pizza Hut made my day, and I was just elated. I'm like, oh my gosh, I had Pizza Hut. And then his response was like, I am so happy you had Pizza Hut. That's so awesome. And it's just, you don't realize how much you take the little things for granted when you're home. But then when you read these emails, it puts things into perspective. Like, wow, we have it good. Things could be a lot harder. They could be a lot worse.
I joined the Army in 2000, and I was a diesel mechanic, all-wheel vehicle diesel mechanic and recovery specialist. He got orders for Iraq, so he went first. At this point, we had a daughter, and she was 1. I didn't answer the door for the entire year he was gone. We had this really long walkway to the house. But I would never answer the door. I wouldn't even go if I didn't know you were coming, I would never answer the door because I was always so afraid that there would be two people on the other side in Class A's.
There was a situation where we had an incident and we had to turn in all of our cell phones and shut down all communication for a week because there was a threat. So I wasn't able to warn anyone or email anyone and say, hey, I won't be able to talk to you. So here I was emailing, virtually every day, and then all of a sudden communication just stopped. And so then your mind goes crazy, like, well, what's going on? And with letters, you wouldn't have got that in the moment. So I think it's bittersweet.
When a telegram was sent, the telegraph operator would type up what was being sent, the message. They would cut it and paste it onto these little slips of paper to be sent to the person at the other end. Back then, it was one of the main ways that the military communicated with the parents of a soldier. And in this case, these telegrams were sent to Graham Skank's mom and dad back here in Dayton, Ohio. And they're very interesting and they're heart-wrenching. Some of them are just heart-wrenching because they first report Graham as being missing in action. Then they followed up with an official letter from the Major General writing to Mr. Skank saying, we regretfully inform you that your son has been reported missing in action in Belgium since December 18th, 1944. And this is a typewritten letter, of course. The general talks about in the letter how difficult it is under war conditions to locate an individual and let them know where he is. And then you see another telegram and with the news that he's been captured. He's a prisoner of war in a German POW camp. Finally, you see letters from Skank from the prison camp. He tells her to go to either a local military office or the library to get help in translating so that she understands where he's writing from. So that must have been very difficult for her to get this in the mail and not be able to read the outside of it, but to open it up and actually have a letter from your son who's a POW. In these letters from the POW camp, he's pretty straightforward with his mom about what's happening, but he also tells her when he knows that he's going to be liberated, and right after he's liberated, he tells her in a letter, I will tell you so many stories when I get home because I can't put it all down on paper right now.
All I can say is it just seems wonderful, and I love you very much. And we always discuss you, and honey, just because I don't write to you doesn't mean that I don't think about you, because you're one person that's on my mind always.
My name is Anthony Massoud. I was in the Army, artillery, and I was an advisor in Vietnam, and I was ROTC, and I was commissioned January of 1964. And I served 3.5 years. We communicated with pen and pencil, paper, walkie-talkie to the States, and then landline, and then tapes, those reel-to-reel pocket tapes.
Boy, you had a nice write-up in the paper about you in Vietnam, and I tore the clipping out and I put it on my fireplace. As soon as I get a chance, I'm going downtown and buy a frame and put it in a frame. My insurance man came over. Anybody that comes over, I show them your picture, and I say, look at my cousin Sonny. I'm down at your mother's house right now, and Tootsie and all of them are sitting around the table making me laugh, and I don't... And I get all mixed up. I don't know what to say to you, because every time I look at Tootsie, her eyes look like they're ready to. She's ready to cry. God bless you, honey, and take good care of yourself. Your mother and all of them are around here, and they all say hello.
Hello, honey. I love you, dear.
God bless you.
What do you think about the tape? I think the tape is wonderful. It's like talking on the phone to him. Hi, Tony. This is your sister, Shirley. I miss you very much, very much. I think
Whenever I got something for the first time that was a positive, it was a good feeling. It was like a surprise. You know, you don't expect it, and it's there. And I loved getting the tapes from my parents and friends, and that was really meaningful because it's like I'm sitting across from you, except my eyes are closed.
We have this misconception with technology that it's easier, and it's actually more frustrating because you're you know, it doesn't always work. There's that disconnect. You know, me and my husband would be mid-conversation, then the internet would go down, and then it wouldn't be up for days, and it almost is taunting you, you know, like, well, we kind of have this technology, you just can't use it all the time, it's going to fail a lot, so you're not really going to get to talk that often. And I think that's where my letdown happened with my deployment, is I had thought in my head, internet, man, it should be a breeze to just call home or email home and get an email back, and it should be no problem. And it was a lot more frustrating than that. Whereas with letters, you know, I would, you know, probably write a letter every single day, send one every single day, and then you could put them together in a timeline and still put yourself in that real life moment if you follow the timeline. Obviously, you know, it'd be in the past, by the time they read these letters, it could be a month or two old before they actually get them, but once they did, they could put it together and see where I was at in that time.
29th of July, 2014, Nene. Babe, Blackhawks are amazing. Private Scott's reenlistment was amazing as well and went off with only one hitch. I messed up the oath. I'm an idiot when I'm nervous, but it was a success. Additionally, we became a minor viral video. Last I checked, we had 12,000 views on Facebook. I'll leave you an autograph at the end of my letter.
People today need to hear these stories from not just the Civil War, World War I, World War II. There are still stories to be told from servicemen.
When it came time for me to go, I was for it. I wanted to go, and he was just like, you don't have to, please don't. And I was like, no, you got the opportunity to serve. You went over there, you did what you had to do. I need that too. I need to feel like I'm protecting this land that I love for my child so she can grow up in this free world. Because I had seen how she was with him, I knew what to kind of expect. But I thought in my head, for some reason, our bond would be better because I'm her mom and I breastfed her and she's close to my heart. It wasn't. It was still just as, I guess, painful. He would send me VHS tapes, and I had to procure a VCR, which was not easy, of what she was watching. And then he would record her also and put her on there. And she loved to sing. And so I have VHS tapes of her singing and jumping on the bed and bossing people around. No idea where she got that from. And the show High Five, she really liked that show. So I would watch the show and be able to talk about the characters, or at least try to engage her for as long as I could get her to stay on the phone before she was off to the next thing. By the time you get the picture, or by the time I got the video, it was on to the next show. It was on to the next thing. It was on to the next outfit. I was always 2 months behind, 6 weeks behind.
We met at the recruiting station here in Huber Heights. They did like a PT preparation for basic training, so we met there. We started running together.
I overheard her talking, asking someone that she needed help running. So I volunteered, like, hey, like, I'm trying to get in shape too, let's do it together kind of thing. So that's how it all started, I guess.
And then obviously if you're running, you start talking, you know, because we'd warm up and walk a few laps and then we'd start talking like, what are you into? What do you know, what's your hobbies? So then we just started talking and then we just connected. So I went to basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and then Joe stayed here and was waiting for his basic training date, and he kind of stepped up and started taking care of my son and was helping my mom and my sister and managing our bank account, because obviously in basic training you don't have a lot of freedom to do those things. And Joe was writing me letters every single day, and he'd send me a care package, you know, as often as I needed one. And so he just really showed his commitment to our relationship during that time. So when I came home from basic training, we got married. So after 10 weeks of knowing each other.
I very type A personality, and I had to learn to let go a lot when I was a military spouse. So it was a lot of just keeping very, very busy. I know for us, it just worked well to work super independently of each other, and I've always been really good at that. And so it's a lot of, okay, this could change, so I'm not gonna get my hopes set on that, but we'll just go with the flow. And so that's how every deployment he's been on, it's totally been like that. Just stay busy.
We never really had issues of getting in contact with each other when we needed to.
Right.
In fact, on my second deployment, I was in Baghdad, and Courtney went into emergency labor.
My parents had actually just left to go to Texas, and I was living with them. They're like a mile away from here. And so they had just left. My sister had just left to go back down to OU. And I was in the house. I was supposed to be dog sitting, and Elliot wasn't due for another month. And then, yeah, he was like, I might not be able to come back for the birth. And I was like, oh, that really sucks. And then literally 2 hours later, my water broke.
She happened to be a truck driver in the military, and she drove around some pretty important people. And those pretty important people just had a conversation with her one day about what she does, what her husband does. And she happened to mention I was in the military. And like, oh, wow, where is he? And she was like, oh, he's still in training. And it's like, oh, it's not too late then. Do you want him to come here? And she was like, I mean, that'd be sweet. And then, of course, she got in trouble for saying that. And then, sure enough, I mean, you always hear everyone say things, and you never really know if they're really serious. But they were serious, and they got me orders to her exact unit. And as soon as I got to Fort Sill, I got the orders to deploy. And
the colonel that had implemented this whole idea, he had went through something similar with his wife. They were dual military, and they got separated for 3 years because of opposite deployment rotation. So he was sympathetic to the situation. He was like, you know, if you get home, your husband's gonna deploy. And I was like, you know, that's our biggest fear. And so he was like, well, if I can get him on this deployment, would that be helpful? And I was like, absolutely. He's like, because then you'd at least somewhat be on the same deployment cycle. So that's kind of how that all got initiated.
They really made it happen.
I get home from Korea, and then he got orders for Iraq. So he would often go dark when they lost soldiers. So it would be sometimes a week or more without hearing from him. And it would be especially those times when I wouldn't answer the door, would only answer phone calls that I knew, wouldn't let anybody at work approach me that I didn't know. Our daughter did not, she stopped talking when he left. So she was at the stage where she could say a few words and was doing okay, just like all the other kids, but she just quit when he left. She would only say 5 words. Cheese, mom, and a few other words to let me know she wanted something, but those were the only words she would say. When he came home on leave, she started talking in sentences. It was the craziest thing ever. I took her to the doctor. I was like, is everything okay? Is this something we need to be worried about? The doctor said, we're seeing this a lot in this area because all the soldiers are being deployed, and she should be just fine. Give her a chance. When he left again, so he only came home on leave, when he left again, she again stopped talking. And when he came back, she didn't start talking right away. She was like, yeah, I ain't pulling one over on me this time.
I'd like to start by saying I had an amazing support system here and over there. I was working for the 1st Infantry Division staff. The same day that the colonel I worked for told me, you're not going back unless it's an emergency birth. It was an emergency birth. Like, she wasn't even awake yet. Ryan, we're sending you back. And all I knew that it was an emergency birth, and it was like almost 6 weeks before he was due. 24 hours later, I was there. But I'll tell you, that was the longest 24 hours of my life. I was very stressed out. I was very nervous Ryan lay sitting in Amsterdam for a couple hours on a layover, but everything went well. Elliot's a healthy kid, and he's more ornery than I'd probably like, but that's a good thing, so I've got no complaints.
I'm coming. Oh no, I'm coming this way.
So at first I was in Afghanistan, but we were at different FOBs. We'd run into each other sometimes, but we never like worked closely together or anything. And then eventually I got moved over to the same FOB she was at, so we got to see each other every day. Then one day we had a mission. We were short people, and I volunteered before anybody realized that I volunteered for the same mission that she was on. No one even realized it until we were already en route, and it was too late. You couldn't change it now. So that's how we ended up on the same mission at the same time.
Yeah, as soon as we got to our destination, we got chewed out because he was a gunner in like the 3rd convoy truck and I was the lead convoy driver. And so then when we got to our destination, they were like, wait a minute.
People were worried that I would look out for her, I guess, more than the mission itself, I guess, because we are obviously married and I care deeply for her. So, but I mean, honestly, me personally, no, it all seemed the same for me. Same job, same everything for me.
In addition, though, another thing they were worried about is us being dual military, both deployed and having a family back home. We can't, if our convoy got attacked, if we got killed in the same convoy, then where does that leave our kid? You know, so that was kind of the biggest issue.
We ended up being apart for 3 years, and over the 3 years, the communication of the lack of true communication didn't work. It just didn't work. He ended it.
While you were deployed?
Mm-hmm. And then I got angry, but it was okay. And I had to focus on staying safe. And so that's what I did.
We actually got a lot of kickback from the other soldiers that we were deployed with that were pissed off that we were together. And we're like, you don't know the hoops we had to jump through, you know, and Joe's thing would always be, tell your wife to join the military then. This right. Isn't easy, you know? And they're like, well, it's not fair. You guys get to be deployed together. And like, well, then tell your wife to join, you know?
Of course it is. My wife gets shot at every day while your wife's at home sleeping in bed. Like, yeah. Of course it's fair.
Yeah.
Of course that's fair. So there was some definite kickback though, but I mean, I didn't care. I got to deploy with my wife and be next to my wife and see that she was safe every day and see her face every day, and so I wasn't upset. I mean, and I was proud of her too. I mean, it takes a lot of, I guess, guts to be in a brand new relationship and still join the military and find a place for your son to stay and not know when you deploy if you're going to come back or if you're even going to see the family you just tried to start building. Like, it takes a lot of guts to do that. So I was super proud of her. I didn't care what anyone had to say. I'm proud of us and what we did together and how we decided to do it. So
the first time that we were looking for houses was the first deployment where we bought the duplex. Yeah, that was that was an adventure, looking for houses without him. We had talked before he even left about wanting to own a rental at some point. It was not perfect though. Like there were definitely hiccups. So we don't want anyone to think like, oh, how'd they have it so easy? Mm-hmm. No, for sure. Like, we didn't do anything with a realtor, and that made it a little bit just different from a normal home buying experience. But also because he was so far away, right before we bought the house, there was like a tiny little freak out. I was at the paperwork signing thing with all the people there. We had the owner, we had like our mortgage dude there, the title company, and I was getting ready to sign papers, and he's like, I don't know if I want to do this. And I was like, this is really bad timing. Are you serious?
That was probably the first big purchase, and yeah, I got cold feet. And you know, I'm not ashamed of that. But yeah, I did. I got cold feet, and it was
a big deal. We ended up talking on the phone about it and kind of just communicating, working through it.
There was the trust there, and we talked about it, and
by the end of the conversation, we're like, okay, we're good. Got all this stuff we were stressed out about out in the air. We found a solution, and we just had to schedule the signing for another day. I think I did an okay job as a military spouse while it lasted.
You're the best military spouse I ever had.
Yeah, oh, thanks.
Yeah.
When I came home on leave, my mother had stayed with them from time to time to help take care of her. And so she knew my mother well. She knew her father well. And I thought that she knew me well, right? She saw me, she gave me hugs and kisses and the whole nine. And looking back, she did that because everybody else was doing that, right? Everybody else was happy to see me, everybody else. So I get there, and our baby's there, and I hadn't seen her in such a long time, and she's much bigger and all this other stuff. And so the day settles down, and we're staying at my aunt's house, and this was like the worst day of my life because she didn't know who I was. And I tried to hold her, and she just screamed like I was this absolute stranger that she had never, ever met or seen before. I was gone longer than he was. When he left, he got to come home, you know, somewhere around 6 months. I did not have that opportunity. So it was a lot. And she screamed for hours, and so I came out, and I was like, what do I do? And my aunt's like, I don't know. And I didn't know what to do either. And so it was like, well, do I call my mom back? Because she was cool. My mom was there. She knew my mom. But she has to know me, right? I held her just close to me and let her cry. And then I just cried too. And I just let her scream bloody murder until she fell asleep. And I fell asleep holding her, sitting straight up against the wall on the floor. And then the next morning, my mom showed up again, and it was slightly better. And then when my mom left, she was cool, a little distant, but she was cool. And then we were okay.
How's your relationship now?
With my daughter? Oh, it's great. She says I'm her best friend, and every day when I walk in, I get a hug. And she's, in her upper teens, and so it's nice that, I can still hold her hand, and we can still be in this phase that a lot of parents don't get when, their kids are teenagers. So it's really, we're really fantastic. And she has an excellent relationship with her father also.
My oldest that went through the deployment with us, experienced being home and having to communicate. We talk about it a lot, and he's very proud that I served, and he tells everyone possible that he can tell, my mom was in the Army, and my mom was a convoy driver, and my mom has a combat action badge, and he understands what it means to us as well as how much it means to him. He's very proud of me and Joe for the sacrifices that we made, and he says that a lot. Like, I know, Mom, he's 14 now, so he says, I know you made a lot of sacrifices, but I appreciate you for it. I got a combat action badge from one of the convoys that I went on. We engaged the enemy, so I got the combat action badge for that. And then we have that on my license plate as well, and then a U.S. Army sticker. So we were in Sandusky for a football tournament, and this lady got up from like a picnic table. They were having like a picnic or something at a park where we were at. And she comes up and she walks past me, so behind the vehicle, past me, over to Joe's window. I was like, sir, I just wanted to tell you thank you for your service and serving our country, and just going in this whole elaborate thing. And then when she walked away, I was kind of like, what the hell? Because that stuff is, for me, not that Joe didn't serve our country or didn't do anything, but, it never even crossed her mind that I was in the military, and that's what was frustrating for me. And we get that a lot.
I don't know, we kind of just smile and laugh about it now because it happens so often. So I don't really think much of it. I mean, people are trying to do the right thing and be nice and reach out and say thank you to somebody. So we don't like hold a grudge or we're not angry at anybody. But I know immediately what she's thinking, and she knows immediately what I'm thinking. And it's, people mean the right thing. It's just, they never ever assume. And it's her too, because she's also a smaller lady. She's not big and scary. So people automatically assume it's definitely not her no matter what. So it's pretty interesting.
My rule of thumb is assume it could be anyone. When I see a female out, I'm like, I wonder if she was in the military or, something along those lines, instead of thinking it could have never been her. I always assume the opposite, that anybody is capable of breaking the stereotype.
I joined the Army in 1996, and then I would join the Navy in like 2000. My dad was in the Army, my grandfather was in the Army, my uncle was in the Marine Corps. On my dad's side, I think his dad was in the Army. It was a family thing.
I always wanted to join. I actually wanted to join the Marines, but I graduated high school when I was 17 and my mom had to sign off, and my mom would not sign off. And so I waited a couple years and I went into the Army because the recruiter was available and the Marine recruiter was not. Anybody hungry? You guys ready?
We met in 2005 and we competed against each other in a pageant, in a drag pageant. He did pretty good.
Who's he?
You.
Oh.
No, we both had a really good time. He came in second alternate that year. And I won. And then he came over and sat by me during this awards brunch, and nobody else had come and talked to me almost the whole time that we had been there. And we had already been there for like 2 or 3 days.
Something like
that. So nobody else wanted to talk to me, to have anything to do with me really. It was, and then he come over and sat down and he was like, "Hi, how you doing?" And, we've been friends ever since.
I'm pretty sure my voice was about like that too.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty much that high.
So I made the first move. And I was just like, "Hey, I'm Joshua." And he's like, "I'm Vince." And I'm like, "Awesome, you're cute." He's like, "No, you're beautiful." And I was like, "You're not from here." You know what I mean? No one in Tampa, Florida called anybody beautiful. Like, it wasn't a thing. So I gave him my number. So I was like very direct. I'm like, "Here's my number. You're gonna take me out. Sound good?" And he's like, "Yeah, I would love that." Right? But he would never have said it because I think our energy is like totally opposite. So then the rest is history. Even though I grew up around the base, my family's not military, so I'm a civilian all the way. But then as I was like thinking about it, I'm like, I think this isn't okay, right? So then I asked him about it, and he's like, "Yeah, it's on us, don't tell. Like, we can't," especially with me being so flamboyant and just like bubbly and airy. He was just like, "We have to kind of like be chill. Are you okay with that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm cool." Until it got into it, and then I realized like how messed up that world was at the time, and how they're like all focused on family first, but not our family, right? It was so devastating. Like, we have 2 kids, and I was just like sitting in the background, like while he went to events, and our kids could go, but I had to stay home.
When I joined the Army, I was presenting as a lesbian female. And I didn't never tell anybody that I was lesbian. We had our own, I don't know how we knew each other were gay and lesbian, for the most part, but, we would go to clubs, on the weekends, gay clubs, and find our family and friends that way. I had already known that I was transgender. I just didn't have a word for it yet. So I thought I was lesbian. I expressed myself as lesbian. And then I met a trans man at a club one night and completely changed my whole life. Even though I knew at that point what was going on with me and I started doing research, I still couldn't do anything about it, because I was in the military. And then even when I went into the Navy, it was the same thing.
Don't Ask, Don't Tell was put in place originally by the Clinton administration as a brokered peace deal, essentially, to allow certain folks to keep serving and to get some unrelated concessions between Congress and the president. There was a lot of push from some conservative right groups that were really concerned that as there started to be, I wouldn't even say base level acceptance, but there started to be consideration that maybe these people were not horribly immoral evil, they would be allowed to co-opt public spaces. Of course, one of the biggest public spaces, one of the biggest prestige spaces in American culture is the military. So to be clear, those folks had been serving and had been serving since the beginning of the United States. It was now we were going to officially address them.
Under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it was such a weird policy in that it asked service members to conceal something that nobody else really had to conceal. And being in the military, families are kind of centered to just your existence in the military. It's definitely different than civilian life in that, your boss expects to know the name of your spouse and your kids and how old they are. And when there are family gatherings or outings, they expect to see, your family there. And I think a lot of the reason why is that when a service member is deployed, their unit is still taking care of their family. So whether they're mowing the grass or making sure the kids get to school or whatever, they definitely focus on that whole family unit. And so under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, even if you had a family, you couldn't tell anybody. And of course, when the questions came up, you had to lie. Even though they say, oh, don't ask, don't tell, you had to be untruthful about it because you have a family, but you can't talk about your family.
I was definitely a lesbian at the time, and it was funny because because I obviously went in as a heavy construction equipment operator, right? Big, butch lesbian, that's what I wanted to do. And there was a person that was in the office. Everybody deemed her as this bitch, and you don't want to talk to her, you don't want to say anything to her, she will get you in trouble, that kind of thing. Literally walked right up to me and was like, hey, I just want to know, I just have a question for you. And I was like, okay. And it was like a Friday afternoon. It was like, I just want to know if you're a lesbian. Nope. Well, the reason why I'm asking is because I am, and we're going out tonight, and I want to know if you're going. And I was like, is this a trick question? I mean, I was scared. I was scared to ask. And, she literally had to say, I'm not kidding. I'm a lesbian. Me and my girlfriend are going out tonight. I want to know if you want to go. And I was like, seriously, am I being punked right now? Like, is this really happening? She was like, I'm serious. You could trust me. We're going out tonight. I want to know if you want to go. I said, if this is serious, I'll go. She was like, I'm serious. You can go. You could trust me. I'm not making this up. So we actually went out and we actually became very good friends.
There's actually some really interesting literature still out there of comic books that were produced by the Department of the Army to make sure people knew what type of evidence they were allowed to consider when it came to kicking someone out. One of the things that was not addressed early on that became a really big piece around the fight to end Don't Ask, Don't Tell was this question of what do we do with them when we kick them out? This is someone who has, in theory, served honorably, has completed training, has done everything required of them, met all of our standards, met the physical standard, met the mental standard, and then we've decided they have to get out. Congratulations, you've served. You have PTSD or you have an injury, and we're going to kick you out and say that you cannot access any of the benefits that you should have been allowed to access. And there was really this tension within a certain segment of American society around, are we doing the moral and right thing? And it was less about like the fight that I saw, at least as someone who was in the service at the time and someone who was following a lot of the larger service organizations. It was really not being presented as gays are good and gays should be allowed to serve. It was being presented as like, these folks are doing exactly what you asked of them. They're serving exactly how you want them to serve. They're preserving the national honor, and then you're kicking them out.
In Tampa is when he was chief select. Yeah. And so we had a ceremony. And that was an event, right? I was so proud of him, but I had to sit there silent. Like I couldn't cry, because why would another guy be crying? Our neighbor was one of the people underneath Vince, so he mentored them, and you know, in the same logistics area at the hospital, and she was our neighbor. And the day of the event, when he was like, you know, the celebration of becoming a chief, she was sitting at the head table with me, and the kids went up and all of that, and she just rested her hand on my back. And I just pushed it away because it was, you know, it's just like such a raw time. I was so nervous. Like I was already trying to like hold myself together, that our two little kids were up there. He's meeting like an amazing chief who like just paved the way, right? And they're like, we're so happy for your family, all of this. And I'm just sitting there like, I wanted to raise my hand and like get up there, but I couldn't. So her doing that, she knew, but you don't talk about it. And that hand was support, which made me want to like lose it. It makes me all emotional. Every time I talk about it, it's been so long, right? But every time I talk about it, it's still like raw. Like just his frustration, my frustration, because I came out at 16. So I was already out of the closet. So then I had to get back into the closet.
I even got pulled into the office one time, and they said, I'm not asking and you don't have to tell, but this is what we heard. This is what somebody came to us about. And it was a mess, you know, and it was, they had accused me of kissing another female at the base club, which was absolutely not true. But they did have to pull me in the office and try that don't ask, don't tell noise with me once. And I just told them, I'm not saying anything. All I know is I didn't do whatever this person is saying that I did. Don't ask, don't tell was a really hard way to live in the military if you were LGBT at all.
As Admiral Mike Mullen has said, our people sacrifice a lot for their country, including their lives. None of them should have to sacrifice their integrity as well. That's why I believe this is the right thing to do for our military. That's why I believe it is the right thing to do, period. I also want to commend our military leadership. Now, ending Don't Ask, Don't Tell was a topic in my first meeting with Secretary Gates, Admiral Mullen, and the Joint Chiefs. We talked about how to end this policy. We talked about how success in both passing and implementing this change depended on working closely with the Pentagon, and that's what we did.
I think what the Army had that civilian life didn't was that model of acceptance. And what I mean by that is like Big Army was like, no, like we're ending Don't Ask, Don't Tell. They can serve openly and you have to accept it. And this is considered a part of your professional development, your ability to lead these folks equally and without discrimination. And I think that's very similar to the integration of the Army is they weren't really a leader for integrating. They were a leader for expecting people to just deal with it and expecting as part of your professionalism for you to treat these folks equally.
On the equal treatment, sir, it just seems like me as a Christian, sir, it just seems like it's not an equal treatment to me because I'm basically being told that regardless of my religion or regardless of my beliefs, I'm just gonna have to grit and bear the fact that, you know, homosexuals are gonna be able to openly serve.
We have to treat everybody with dignity and respect. And as long as we do that, nobody's telling you you can't follow your Christian beliefs. Because nobody's telling you what your sexual orientation needs to be. Okay? You don't have to change any of your beliefs based upon sexual orientation. All we're doing is telling you how you have to act at work and off work when you're dealing with issues related to something that's private.
I think we're finally there as far as the legal aspect goes. Now, as far as the cultural aspect and stuff, you know, there's still a ways to go there.
LGBT community meshing with the veterans, it's fine in the LGBT
It's
part.
seamless.
Yes, we just...
On the other side, you have a lot of people that are okay with it, but then you also have the people that aren't okay with it, you know, and it to them it feels forced. And unfortunately, we're not trying to force it on them. It's just who we are, and they just probably don't understand. And I think it's just an educational. It's an education problem. If they could just get to know somebody, if they could really sit down and actually talk to them, or they could, you know, just have a better understanding that this is just who I am. This is just part of me.
We're just like you. Like, we're small business owners, we're fathers, and we happen to love each other. Like, what's so different about that? I really feel that we need to love a lot more, forgive a lot more, and embrace people for what their differences are. Like, hands down. If we just forgive, love, and just embrace. That's it.
Stay strong.
Yeah, stand your ground.
Stay strong.
Stand your ground.
Because you know that we will always fight, and we are a very resilient people. And regardless of the decisions that are made today, we will always do what we do best, and that is to fight for who we are and what we are, and fight for others.
People that can't fight for themselves.
That's correct.
So our mission 100% is to build successful products to support the warfighter and first responders. And you know, I feel like my military career got cut short by being medically separated, but this is a way that we can still stay in the fight and help the guys who are still currently fighting.
In order to truly understand your customer, you have to know them. And we call that customer discovery. For an active duty military person, that looks like they already know the problems. They already are intimately familiar with the situations that military personnel face. They're already familiar with a lot of the problems on the inside, and they understand it because they have the insight. They talk the talk, they walk the walk. So when it comes to understanding a problem that you're trying to solve with a technology or a small business service, they already understand that.
So when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, we were burning through chem lights, and they're rolling under things, and you know, you have to carry so many of them. When we clear a facility and we go room by room and kill or capture whoever needs killed or captured, we leave a glow stick. And once the whole facility is secured, we'd work backwards and reverse and grab up all the intel and leave another chem light. So that way when you walked into a room and saw 2 chem lights, you knew, hey, this has been, you know, cleared of people and intel, and move on to the next room.
When it comes to small business in general, the number one goal is to make it customer focused. If you build something nobody wants, then you've built a nice paperweight of a product.
Through night vision, you can see the glowing IR powder, and without night vision goggles, there's nothing to be seen. It is designed for friend or foe identification so that we can see who the good guys are on the battlefield and in training exercises. It just seemed like such a no-brainer from my past ground experience. A chem light is just like the same glow sticks that you'd buy your kids and that you break and shake and they glow. Whereas with the Craytac, you can carry one and get about 1,000 equivalent, and now you can ride at eye level. It just seemed like such a no-brainer from my past ground experience. So after you clear the room, you take the Craytac and you just put a slash on the wall outside the door, and then when you come back and do your second search for all the intel, you make an X, and then this will glow for about 90 minutes. In order to see this, you have to have on night vision goggles that are highly controlled by U.S. exports. So we're really providing a solution that we can covertly communicate in low light, no light situations. We firmly believe this changes the experience on the battlefield by saving time and saving weight, and then we're also not leaving any waste on the battlefield or training areas as well.
And they can go to those potential customers and say, I can vouch for this because I've seen this in person. I've seen this in real life.
As an entrepreneur, it's funny, we were talking about this the other day, is we reference our military careers far more than we do our MBAs or masters. And I think with two of the founding partners being prior military and one coming from a military family, we were all very used to working on those small teams to accomplish a goal. And I think that background kind of provided us the foundation to have a successful company.
Entrepreneurs are very unique individuals. They have a lot of drive, they have a lot of intellect, and they have a lot of tenacity. And it's not so different from military personnel and veterans or active duty. There's a skill set there for wanting to chase after goals and dreams and really knowing how to hit the ground running and to chase after something.
When I was on active duty, I was an officer, I was a program manager, and the position of a program manager is like a glorified team leader. I was at Robins Air Force Base, and I had a big program, a multi-billion-dollar program that I was working on, and a side project that they gave me was called the Military Airborne Firefighting System, which was a C-130 that dropped fire retardant around fires. That was a side project that I worked on maybe one time a week that they said would never get any attention because who needs to call us for a forest fire? California had a wildfire. Governor Schwarzenegger was there at the time, and he had written the president and said, we don't have enough resources here in the state. We need federal support. Well, I was one of 4 program managers that were chosen by an executive order from the president for the California wildfires in 2008. Well, I not only have to talk to the Forest Service and all these agencies to understand the mechanics of putting out a wildland forest fire when I'm in Georgia and it's in California. How do you explain that to the general? The general's asking you, the commander of Air Force Materiel Command wants you to write speeches on his behalf in all of his news stories, and you are 23 and you're at the office until almost midnight ghostwriting for a 4-star general. So that is the level of responsibility that they give you the moment you walk in. So when you take all of that as an entrepreneur, I want to tell my peers and anyone who wants to go into entrepreneurship, moments like that arrive. I'm a 4th generation veteran, and my grandfather was in the Korean Vietnam War. His name was Charlie Farrell. His call sign was Mutt because he had the ability to blend in anywhere. So in 1956, he came up with this idea. He was very passionate about condiments and food. He wanted to make a sauce that we could use for anything, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. So about 2005, he had passed away from cancer. I was the one person that he chose before he passed away to get the only copy of the recipe that he kept in his wallet. So for me, being on active duty, I thought that that was my purpose, to serve our country But this was something new. I couldn't explain it. He hadn't given me any instructions, and the story of our relationship in life was anytime I asked for something from him, it was a transaction. So you have to do something in order to get something. Nothing's ever just given to you. So I was very shocked that he just gave me this recipe that everyone wanted. He had 5 children who were still alive at the time and left it to his 3rd grandkid. I took it upon myself to decide that I perceived that the value of this piece of paper was more than just a recipe. This could be a family legacy that he's passing to me. We made 700 bottles made by the Amish in Chillicothe, Ohio. They hand poured every bottle. I had a launch party. I joined the Beaver Creek Chamber of Commerce. They had a launch party for us, and we ended up selling every single bottle within a week. It's an honor, really, to be able to share something of my family that has had such a positive impact on other people and even in the country. Some of the things that we've accomplished really are humbling. We're on a special deck of bicycle cards made by the U.S. Playing Card Company now. We've been on Shark Tank. We won the Bob Evans Farms Veteran-Owned Business of the Year in 2017. We've met great people like the CEO of IAMS and gotten his feedback, Clay Mattheil. We've seen so much and experienced so much, and it's just with such gratitude that we're able to be here in this area in Ohio and be an Ohio veteran-owned company.
For those veterans, for those active military personnel, to take on those entrepreneurial traits means that they're already set up for a really good foundation of the skill sets that it's going to take, because it's really hard to go from an idea to a business, and they have the skill sets, the tenacity to go from idea to viable business.
I needed an outlet. I wanted to improve on something, and it was very much in my wheelhouse. And everybody's good at something. This is something that I was good at, and I wanted to chase it down. One night I was researching multivariate statistics, not terribly interesting. And off to the side was a learn how to sew video. And something I've always wanted to do was learn how to sew. I mean, that sounds odd, but I'm a huge outdoorsman, spend a lot of money on gear, and it doesn't always fit me. So I went out and bought a sewing machine the very next day, watched a few videos, and started sewing. And it was terrible. It was, the products that I was making were bad. But what it did was it gave me a tangible good, and that's something that I've never had. I had to go to Korea for an exercise, and it was a 3.5-week exercise. One of the things that Koreans are known for is their amazing ability to tailor. I wasn't looking for anything to wear necessarily. What I was looking for was a new tactical duffel bag to carry on a fly fishing trip that I had coming up. And so I spent a lot of time off base, going through different stores, and several stores, it was mediocre, the material that they used or the whatever, it wasn't good stuff. And I found maybe a mile and a half off base, I found a store that was really good. They had really good equipment. And by this time, I knew what good stitching looked like because I had done it, because I know what bad stitching looked like because I had produced plenty of bad stitching. So I bought the bag, reasonably priced, fit, what I needed it to do. And I took it back to my dorm room, and everything was great except one pocket. One pocket just did not make sense. So the next time I had a day off, 3 or 4 days later, I went back down there and I just said, hey, I love the bag. It's going to suit my needs, but I really think if you took this pocket off, you could introduce all these accessories that you have on the wall that you're trying to sell. Maybe 3 or 4 days afterwards, I went back down there just to check in, see if there was anything else I wanted, and they had actually made the change that I recommended. But then they said, hey, would you mind coming down to our warehouse to show us other things, other ways that we can improve? And I said, absolutely. I mean, that's right in my wheelhouse. So I went down there and looked at their products and made some recommendations and, was happy. When I came back to the States, I filed for an LLC and I created a business. I just looked at what I had available to me, what I was interested in improving. So I had a elk hunting trip coming up in the fall, and so I looked at, you know, the things in my pack. I'm thinking how I can potentially combine products. So I'm always going to carry a dry bag. I'm always going to carry water filtration system. And then the third thing that I looked at was how can I stay warmer? So I looked at those three things and I thought, well, if I can make something that does all those, I'd probably have a product that's worthwhile. So I went to the drawing board and just started making stuff and came up with an idea. We are producing, we are selling, a patent has been issued. I got a pretty large order on Friday, my first government contract actually. A squadron is getting ready to deploy and they wanted the bags to take with them. So fingers crossed that it goes well.
It's not for the faint of heart. It is a roller coaster. There's many hills and valleys, and you have to really be prepared for the psychological toil of entrepreneurship, which they don't really talk about so much.
We've definitely hit roadblocks and taken steps back throughout this whole entire process, but we've never given up on that end goal, that end mission, if you would. I think the biggest thing is just in the military, we refuse to fail, right? Failure is not an option on our missions.
Along the lines of, you know, being in the military for 24 years, for doing a doctoral program, for starting a business, it's all about perseverance.
Veterans go through so much already. By the time they've become a veteran, they've experienced probably more trauma and strife and challenges than most people would ever experience in a lifetime. What I've noticed is a skill set, but an unfortunate skill set of veterans, is we're pros at compartmentalization. We'll put stuff in a box. Pain and hard times, we just put it in a box and we go on to the next thing. Entrepreneurship has a way of revealing all of those boxes. People can see right through you in the business world. So you have to learn how to be true to yourself and own even the hard times as an entrepreneur. And that sometimes is hard for a veteran to be vulnerable and transparent about the journey.
One thing I was struggling with, came to later find out was PTSD, you know, type symptoms. What I found, however, was I was really good at compartmentalizing things. However, having to talk about it, I was not so good at. Sewing gave me an outlet. And so, you know, if I put on some classic rock and got behind the sewing machine, I could just do that for hours. And that started taking the place of school for filling that void for some of the demons that I struggled with. So I went to the library every day and checked out an entrepreneur book. And I read, I think, 12 or 13 books. Every one of those books just told you the odds are against you, right? And I just said, this is what I'm going to do.
You know, honestly, I think there's no better feeling. I've never been happier professionally, showing up every day, knowing that something I'm working on eventually is going to make the life easier or better for a warfighter or first responder.
We've been at war now since 2001. We have a lot of young kids who've been out doing all the heavy lifting, and that's all they know. They came out of high school, that's all they know. And we need to help those guys come out and understand what's going on, what they can do, because they're thinking, you know what, I'm a trigger puller. You know, that's all I know. No, it's not. You know, you've led 8 guys or 20 people, or 30, you've done this, you've done that. Let's help transition those skills into the civilian workplace. And that's where hiring veterans really comes in well, because you have these young kids coming out thinking they don't know anything but doing what they were doing in the military, and then it's like, you have no idea how valuable you are.
One of our company's principles and values is to promote and have diversity and inclusion of difference of thought. So that comes from people with different backgrounds and people with different experiences, and obviously veterans are a huge part of that, and they're a group that literally speaks to that diversity of thought and background and experiences. So our efforts and our initiatives are to be more than just an affirmative action plan, a percent, a statistic. We want to really create that part of, to be part of our culture, of our identity, of our pedigree. So we make every effort and we promote the effort of recruiting and hiring and including the veterans in our workforce. I think that what they don't realize is how much leadership they have in them. And leadership is such an ambiguous word, you don't always know how to apply it, but that comes in understanding the people around you, being more receptive to one another. It's not just about the work skills, because that's something we can train here. It's the soft skills that we're looking for. And veterans usually tend to have those a lot more well developed.
I shudder to think of what I would have done without the military. When I was younger, I flew, so we'd be on the aircraft carrier and you'd get up, figure out, you'd know the night before what you were going to do for that day, if you're going to be flying or if you're going to have the duty and be a ground guy. And my favorite job, I was a line division officer. So I had all the 18, 19 years old, just out of A school in the Navy. They're the ones getting the planes ready to go flying. So you'd have a really young, ambitious group of guys who were brand new to the Navy, and you got to sit there and work with these guys. And you come back from a hop and they go, "What's going on? What happened? What'd you guys do?" Because they have no idea. They're just getting the jets ready. That's their world. But then when you can tie that world to what you're doing, they get why they're doing it. And that's the neat thing about the military experience, is it gives you those skill sets to understand how people tick, how you maybe have to modify your way of dealing with people to get results.
We know that veterans carry a lot of amazing skill sets with them. They're not just their occupational specialty. They have so much more that they bring to the table. And those are all great skill sets for any company.
We see what leadership,
team building,
skills, team building.
Yeah, communication skill is a huge one. And management of people, understanding safety and security.
Innovative thinking, operating in a diverse environment. These are all skills that our veteran population brings to play that a lot of times they don't even think about when they transition, because it's not part of their job description. It's just what you do.
I actually deployed for the first time last year. I was deployed overseas to the Sandbox and did the same mission that I was trained every weekend to do here at Wright Pat. When I first joined Synchrony, I was a reservist at the time, but I had no idea the level of understanding and care that Synchrony has for its veterans and currently serving members. And so I didn't know about that until probably about a year or so into my time at working with Synchrony, and I found out about the Veterans Network. And what the Veterans Network is, it allows vets currently serving members of the armed forces, as well as what we call our passionate patriots. So these are folks that did not serve in the military, but they understand the sacrifice that our service members have had to make. And so they are there to support any endeavors, whether it be outreach in the community, raising money that goes to helping out vets. They are there doing the exact same work that our service members are doing within the organization.
So I was in the Air Force as an officer, and GE has a program called Junior Officer Leadership Program, JOLP, where they essentially look to recruit talented officers from the military to be in future leadership positions. The way I like to look at it is it sort of gives me an ability to have a diverse skill set here at GE that I would have had I worked here my entire career. I just completed my first work assignment, which was here in Dayton, Delano, working as a manufacturing programs manager. 8-month rotations in the military. I've changed job assignments once a year, so that's really fairly similar. Some of the differences are when I come to GE, I'm trying to understand the rank structure, and it's not a direct correlation, so that's a little bit odd. One of the biggest differences was I wasn't wearing a uniform anymore, so I actually have to dress myself. And sometimes I get out of my car and I'm outside and I'm like, wait, where's my cover from the military time? I think right now one of the things the military is really working on is their transition program and how they prepare service members for their transition to the civilian sector.
I just remember sitting in the transition assistance program, writing down, I'm not really sure why I did this, because maybe it was because I didn't know what else to do, but I sat in the transition assistance program and just wrote down websites. And I finished the week and I had like 6 pages of websites. And then I was like, what am I going to do with this? Why did I do that?
I got a lot out of TAP. I thought it was very valuable, but the problem is it was so much information in such a short period of time that it was very easy to data dump. You're learning in 1 week, you're trying to learn all your benefits, you're learning how to do a resume, how to do an interview, how to dress for success. There's just such a variety of information that comes out of the TAP program in a 1 week period that it's a challenge to keep up. When you go back and you do it 6 months to a year before you transition out of the service, if you're not applying some of the skills right away, I didn't apply the skills right away, so TAP became less value added to me.
It's a great idea that every veteran has to go through it and that it's congressionally mandated, because we remember the days where, you know, you just signed the paperwork, you checked out of your unit and you were gone. And there was no transition. And those weren't good days. And a lot of those people are still not getting benefits that they deserve because nobody held their hand and said, hey, you know, you could fill out this piece of paper and look at particular different benefits that you earned through your service.
As a veteran, I'm really happy to see they have these things put into place to better help you during your time of transition, at least to provide you with some resources and give you some direction and guidance. So the purpose of today's briefing, it's mandated by Title X, and I'm just going to talk about some things that are available to you, places to go for help while you're transitioning.
One of the things that I'm learning is, you know, the different websites and the things that they do offer us is amazing, because these are things that we didn't know about, you know, just being regular soldiers, that when you get ready to get out, you're like, oh man, like, okay, so we got people that really are looking out for us, and it's really helped me a lot.
Paper in front of you is every website we're going to be talking about this morning.
What I like teaching about this class is really connecting with the veterans, or the people that will be veterans, just to see individually what it is they need and what I can do on my part to help them connect to have a successful transition. Back in the 90s, I served in the military for 6 years, and I didn't have, you know, transition assistance program was optional. We watched a VHS tape called From Air Force Blue to Corporate Gray, and I really couldn't tell you anything about what it was about, but I do remember one of the thoughts I had was, if I'm having this tough of a time transitioning as someone who served for 6 years, what would it feel like for someone who's been in for 20 plus years? And so that has always really stuck with me about knowing, it wasn't even about the financial aspect, it was just about the feeling of camaraderie, working with people similar to you. It's such a small population that serves with the military, so it's a real strong family aspect to that, and kind of having that taken away was very difficult.
All right, Ellen, you going back to work? Come on, this is a week of 5 days. Guess
I think the program runs pretty smoothly, but it can be chaotic because you're trying to deal with over 1,200 people who go through this class a year. And we have at least 40 to 50 people who leave every month who are actually exiting the military. But it's a lot of information. It's an information overload. It can be very stressful. We also have to keep up with the emotions of everyone leaving. We have to keep up with the organization of what they have to turn in for Department of Defense, because regardless, we still work for the government. We still have to make sure that's taken care of. And we have to make sure that people truly understand that, hey, you're leaving the military. You're not going to be sergeant or captain or lieutenant. You're going to be Mike, John, Bob, or Michelle. Either way it goes, it can be chaotic, it can be fun, and it could be a smooth transition, or it can be a wild transition.
When you're in the military, you don't have to live with a resume or an interview process for your assignments. You get orders that tell you where you're going to go, who you're going to work for, who's going to work for you, what your job's going to be. It basically lays everything out on paper for you. So when you leave the military service, you leave with an incredible broad spectrum of technical knowledge, but you have basically high school level job seeking skills.
I left active duty in 1999. I came to the GE Capital side, and there was a big military hiring going on at GE back in those days, like today with a lot of companies. So I showed up and I was just like, oh my God, this is so different. And it's just because you don't know what's going on. You don't know what people do outside of the military. The good news is the military also preps you, I think, really well for resiliency. At least in my case, I knew this was going to be totally different. So how do you embrace that? How do you learn that? How do you figure this culture out?
Honestly, the program was pretty well set up. It worked well for me personally. So with that being said, I almost felt like it was overhyped. Like I talked to a lot of people who would transition and they were like, oh, it's really weird to be out of the military. And then when I finally made it to be out of the military, I was like, okay, this isn't as weird as I kind of expected it to be.
When I transitioned out, I went through the transition assistance program at the base and very promptly brain flushed just about everything I learned because I did it about 9 months before I retired. And I ended up going, I had a lot of things on the regular duty schedule that took priority. So I put it off and put it off and put it off. And it was almost an example of how not to do a transition the right way. I lived that. I waited to do my resume until I was actually on terminal leave. So I've got 2 months to get a resume out there and find a job. I started doing job fairs at that point. So I put myself behind the power curve. I did not know how to do an effective resume because all the lessons that I got from TAP had long since been put away. So I made something that looked like the resume I saw in the book and turned it out there, and it was an absolute failure. There was a lot of lessons that I took from that process and learning the value of networking and connections, and that's what really started me on this path. And I realized, I can do something for other people so they don't live the same dream I did, so they don't make the mistakes I did, so they can get into the system better when they leave the military service. Cassie and I get to go talk to every TAP class, and it's a short block, and it's pretty much we get to give an introduction to the support we can provide to them after TAP. Basically, we're here to fill the gaps and give them a resource to reach back to after they get done with the TAP program, even after they leave the service, to help them with their transition process. But on top of that, it's a chance for both of us to talk about lessons learned, which I think is probably one of the things that's best received by the group, is they're going to listen to two people who went through TAP, in some cases who did their transition as wrong as they possibly could and still managed to find a job. It gives us some chance to tell them, it's like, this is what we did. You probably don't want to do it the way we did. But we find that opportunity because Wright-Patterson's given us that opportunity. I think that helps a lot of the folks going through TAP. They're getting the benefit of practical experience.
I still am pretty active in the veteran community outside of GE. So I make sure if I meet somebody and they're a veteran, I'm like, what are you doing? Do you like it? What are you thinking? Because they may be in something where they thought, this is a stopgap. I just want to do this for a while and then I'm going to do that. And like right now here at Unison, we need welders, we need trades, we need stuff like that. And so it's like, hey, have you thought about, and just you get the word out. But I tell them there's things out there you can be doing. There's places to go. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I've had mentors throughout my life. If I see somebody or I have a friend who's got a kid coming out of the military, I'm like, have them get a hold of me. Have her give me a shout because they don't know what they don't know. And having somebody who's been out there, no matter what the rank, it's scary. So I don't care if you're a kid coming out, of your 4-year hitch or, you're a retired captain coming out of the Navy or something. It's a little daunting. And it helps seeing that somebody else has been there before you, had all the same concerns you had, and they're doing okay.
Right before I deployed, I received an email from a representative from the National Veterans Network Council and asked me if I wouldn't mind having my name on a wristband. And this is the wristband. And it says Synchrony Veterans Network, and then it has my name, Aaron Stokes. So there were 2 other people who deployed around the same time that I deployed, and the Veterans Network made, I believe, 400 to 500 of these for everybody. And they passed them out at the Diversity Symposium and then allowed for representatives to take them back to their home locations. When I tell you that the amount of gifts and love was overwhelming, it was nothing short of that. I received over 30 to 40 packages from my team, from the Veterans Network, from the African American Network, from everyone at the Kettering site. Even some of my clients sent things over to me. So, I mean, it truly showed my troops, because I shared with every one of them and even had enough left over to leave for the next group that came through. But it showed them that Synchrony truly is a great place to work, and that they care most of all about the individual, and that we're not just another number to them.
And there's no better day for me when I get an email from a veteran who said, hey, you know, I'm here now. I'm in this company and I couldn't be happier. That's just an amazing feeling, and I want to do more of that. So it's really become a huge passion for me.
What are some stereotypes or misconceptions about veterans that you see this story challenging? There's some ideas about what veterans are, and this story, I think, is challenging some of them. And I'm asking you maybe to help me articulate what we're challenging in even telling this story at all.
I think stereotypes, you know, there's a certain stereotype for people that go into the military, which, you know, the stand tall, you know,
right,
masculine, you know, and wanting to do the rough jobs and infantry, and, you know, that stereotype of, you know, who joins the military. You know, not everybody's like that.
You know, there's so many stereotypes of veterans, and all stereotypes come off with some base of fact. So I think it comes down to, you know, your personal experience with veterans. But really, you know, we're not that much different than anybody else.
If I'm, like, I had a stereotype when I even asked the question. So we're talking about veterans being in lockstep. I can't do anything unless somebody tells me where to go. I can't, you know, I'm lost without that sort of structure of the military. Like, that's a stereotype.
Yeah.
And then a veteran entrepreneur is shattering that stereotype, right? Because you're creating your own structure, you're creating your own direction, you're meeting goals that you create for yourself. So I think one stereotype could be that somehow the military beats out creativity, right? Because you're just doing whatever you're told. And that's not happening here.
I think it depends too. Like, my career path in the military promoted creativity.
So what was your career path?
Yeah, so my last job, I was a protective service agent, you know, dressed more like you than a traditional soldier most days. And the whole goal was to make sure we killed our boss. And so we had to be creative on the way we drove and the routes we took and the way we planned. We had full mission autonomy though. So I feel like all that helped me, where, you know, the traditional Joe in the Army being told what to do. I think it just really depends on that person's career path and kind of the way they went.
So the misconception that I see is that since we have technology, it's easy to communicate, and that it should be a non-issue. That, you know, like what you said, so many people would get frustrated at the spouse because they wouldn't answer. And I would find myself doing the same when I'd call my son. I'd want to talk to him when I wanted to, when I had time. And I'm like, what if tomorrow doesn't come and I didn't get to call and talk to him? And that sort of pressure is not something that you should be dealing with on a deployment when you're trying to keep you and your guys safe. Like, you need to be 100% focused. So those sort of distractions are why a lot of people pull back. And so I think the misconception is that communication is easy because there's technology. And I actually find that it's a lot more difficult.
And I would say, too, another misconception would be the idea that when you marry someone who's in the military, you're going to get to go on all these awesome adventures together. And so on the one end, it's like, oh, it's going to be doom and gloom and you're going to break up if he deploys or she deploys. But then on the other side of it, it's like, oh, you get to go all over the world and do all these awesome things. Then you kind of forget about the hard parts. And so when you get there, it makes it that much more challenging.
So, I mean, the common stereotype I'm always harping on is, you know, don't underestimate which one served, because you don't know by looking at the two of you who served. And it's offensive to think otherwise. So I think just keep in mind that, you know, you don't know who served. Mm-hmm. That's my biggest thing.
I think when you think of a veteran, it's part of who I am. You know, whenever I think of what I did as a veteran, you know, everybody's like, thank you for serving. Well, you're welcome, you know. But there's a lot of other veterans out there as well, you know. And I think what I did for my country, you know, I'm proud of what I did. just like me being, you know, trans is just a part of who I am and what I do. Yes, we, Gage and I, do challenge that, because when people see us at the VA, they have absolutely, when they see us in the hall, they do not know that we're trans. They have absolutely no idea. They might think that we're just friends, so they might not even know that we're married. They might not know that we're a couple. So, you know, I think that we actually challenge a lot of things when you're talking about us. You know, we challenge a lot whenever it comes to the VA, and when
we're
it comes
definitely
to
not the stereotypical. We're not
doctors.
the same. We're not the type of people that most people think that we are, I guess.
Yeah. You know, I had one of his doctors tell me the reason why he was having so many problems was because he was going against nature. You know, that was at the VA, and you know, we had to work through that. You know, that was an opinion of somebody.
Right.
You know, and I think that it's challenging, but at the same time, it's who we are.
I am curious, maybe if, Logan, you could talk a little bit more about, it seems to me I've met more people who are part of dual military families, and definitely while the rate of people serving in the military has gone down, the rate of women in the military serving has definitely gone way up, right? And I think it's still going to go up. You know, I think they're 18% now, and they project that it will probably double, I think, in the future. So what is that like? I mean, and your whole story is about that misconception, but maybe talk a little bit more about that if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I honestly think that it has more advantages than disadvantages. So of course it has its, you know, hurdles, and it sucks. You spend a lot of time apart, which you do when you're not dual military. But the best part is I can have my husband in a combat zone. I mean, he was at another FOB, but it was 30 miles or so down the road, and I at least knew he was close, and I could potentially see him depending on the runs that I did. And the second biggest thing from that I can be with him a lot more than I couldn't be, is he gets it. Like, he gets me.
Right.
Like, he understands when I'm like, when I was sifting through emails, almost all of my emails said, sorry I didn't call you today, I'm just too exhausted. Sorry I didn't talk to you last night, I was too exhausted. Sorry I seemed out of it, I'm just exhausted. And you would be like, how do you not have time to talk to me? I get it, you're deployed, but you don't even have 5 minutes to talk to me? No, I don't. And he was extremely sympathetic when I came home, and I was very just like, no one touch me, no one come near me, everyone just leave me alone. And he just let me be me. And the fact that he was patient and he could sympathize with what I was going through and the demand put on me physically, mentally, and emotionally, he just got it. And he could be sympathetic and be patient with me. And I think that is why we made it out, is because we were dual military. I think if he hadn't had an inside look on what it's like, and neither had I don't think we would have made it.
So one thing that you mentioned earlier was, do you guys get any training on how to communicate with your families? And they said, well, we get a lot of training on how not to. And so honestly, I think that's a big thing, is taking the time to actually work with families on how to communicate and what to expect on a deployment, because that's one thing that, like, I had no expectations when it came to communication. I knew they gave me all the details on where they were going to be. They would give me the details on, like, the kind of stuff that they would be doing, as much as they could share with the families. They didn't take the time to inform us on, like, what communication would look like for 9 to 12 months, or what kind of effect that has on people. And so I think that's something that needs addressed, is actually taking time to teach people how to communicate with each other when they're so far apart.
I mean, I'll say, when I heard about what you guys did, it shattered a conception for me, right? It did. It was creative and romantic and very personable, and it sort of took it allowed you guys to be intimate in a way that was over a long distance. And I think if I wouldn't know to do those things if I was in that situation, if nobody had shown me, right? Which is what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think, everything's mission driven in the military. You don't do anything without a clear purpose and task and, success factors.
But at some point, like Charlinda in the video, she opens up telling us, I have this side project, right, that's never going to get off the ground, and I'm not going to do anything with it, and so I'm just supposed to pay attention to it. And then suddenly that's the thing that's taking over for her and providing her all of this intense leadership experience, right? That is, it's just hard to get anywhere, right? Like for a 23-year-old.
Yeah. It's like prioritizing, what's more important at the time and conquering that and then going forth with the next thing. So, yeah, I think that too, society, they're looking at veterans in a different kind of light now, and that helps entrepreneurs to step forward and do a lot more than they have done in the past.
So did your dad get out of he was in the military during the Vietnam era, right?
Yes.
And then, so anybody that's been involved with the Veteran Voices Project for a long time, when we talk to Vietnam vets, we hear that same thing, like, it's so different now.
Yes.
It's so different now. It's so different now.
I can say that because I was his child, and the level of respect for veterans was not there as it is now. And I'm so glad to see people, society, step up to the plate and say, well, yeah, they have done this and this and that. Well, this is wonderful and good, so give them a chance. I see so many companies that veterans have put out that is amazing to me. It's just, I can't believe the work that they do. When my father was in the service and he got out, there wasn't that kind of camaraderie there for people who are out there, just doing a day's work and trying to make $1 and raise their families and stuff like that. And there's a lot of respect there, and I just am overwhelmed, and I am joyed to know that she has colleagues like you to talk to
That's a huge
and relate
compliment
to.
coming from you.
But we've seen people say to us, how can you work with veterans? Aren't you afraid? Right? Because there's an assumption that they're dangerous, right? And it's like, I'm in the safest office on campus. I don't know what you're talking about, right? Like, so how do we combat some of those misconceptions and stereotypes?
PTSD is one of the biggest elephants in the room when it comes down to hiring veterans. They've actually done a survey of HR managers across the Society of Human Resource Management. I think it was 56% said that PTSD is a concern when they look at hiring a veteran. The reality, National Institute of Health has done a study, and the reality of Operations Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom is about 1 in 5 veterans has post-traumatic stress. And that's not all the way to the level of post-traumatic stress disorder. Right. That's post-traumatic stress. That 1 in 5, 20%. You're going to see those same numbers with people who've experienced a traumatic event. They've seen that same rate with the first responders to Hurricane Katrina. Violent crime, accidents, weather events, military combat, sexual assault. There are a variety of things that could all create post-traumatic stress. So unfortunately, by painting the picture of post-traumatic stress as a real mental health concern, they've brushed veterans with a very, very broad brush, unfairly in some points. So they validated a real mental health need, but they did it so well that they basically colored all of us with that same brush. There is no link between post-traumatic stress and workplace violence. That's been studied. There is no statistical link whatsoever there. And I loved your comment that you're in the safest place on campus. I have to agree with that. You've got people who know how to respond to a crisis. When you have a situation like you had in during the tornadoes, or perhaps some of the other recent disasters or tragedies, you look at how military veterans respond. You have people that are specifically trained to react, and they're generally reacting in a positive direction.
Is it comfortable being the trailblazers that you are?
Yes.
Sometimes.
I'm pretty comfortable. I'm comfortable in my own skin.
Right.
I used to be really, really comfortable with it. It's been later here lately that it's been more of a, do I really want to divulge this part of my life and that part of my life and to these people and those people? But
we were actually having a conversation on the way over here, and And I said, you know, I think that it's okay for us to be vulnerable because I think that it shows courage. And for us to not, you know, because when you talk about mental illness, when you talk about, you know, when you talk about all the things that we have going on in our lives, right, there has to be some form of self-care. There has to be some form of, holy crap, I'm not okay today, right? But there also has to be a plan in place. And that's something that we get from the military. You know, you plan for the worst, but you hope for the best, but you're always planning. And that's what our training taught us, taught me anyway, was for me to have a plan in place for when something big happens, I know what to do, right? Something big happens to us, we have a plan in place, you know, I know what to do. You know, we have a lot of facets to our life, and I think that us showing vulnerability all the time makes us human, and it puts us on a level that, you know, that people can relate to, I guess.
I've spent most of the last 18 years deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, usually as an embedded reporter. And for most of that time, listening to, encouraging people to tell their stories and writing their stories. And the reason why I was doing that is twofold. One is just to preserve their experiences because they are so unique and they're part of our national treasure. These are people that we have elected to send into harm's way, and they've done that and come back. And we owe it to them not just to listen to their stories, but to share them among ourselves so that we know what has happened as a result of our responsibility to do this. So a lot of these stories don't involve some huge, dramatic, movie-like kind of event, but it's, you know, deeply personal and so important for us out here to understand.